Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here with Suzanne Nadell. With an extraordinary 30-year career in journalism, Suzanne has led some of the nation's leading newsrooms, including WSB-TV, one of the top local TV stations in the country. Since Suzanne returned to WSB-TV as news director in 2019, the station has brought home dozens of Emmy Awards, regional Edward R. Murrow Awards, and a Gracie Award, which recognizes women in media. Suzanne has also led and worked in newsrooms in Orlando, Tampa, Pittsburgh, Tulsa, Fort Myers, and Johnson City, Tennessee. She received a BA in communications from Milligan College in Johnson City. She and her husband Michael have a teenage son and are active members of Atlanta Christian Church and live in Brookhaven, Georgia. Suzanne enjoys writing and speaking about life lessons learned from leading newsrooms, fighting off cancer multiple times, and growing her faith. Suzanne is an alum of Writing for Your Life, and her first book, titled Wired to Lead, Being the Leader the Church Didn't Think You Could Be, was recently published by Chalice Press. Yay! You can learn more about all of Suzanne's work at suzannenadell.com and, of course, chalicepress.com. So, Suzanne, congratulations on all your work, and thanks for joining us to talk a little bit about
Thank you for having me. Great to be here. Very excited.
it. Same here. Is there anything else you'd like people to know about you?
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's, I think people always ask me what I'm most proud of. And I think, to know whenever you go all through all of that is that I think it's all intertwined. And that's a lot about what I talk about is the intertwining of all of those things, how they make us the person who we are and those experiences through it. So it's, everybody's like, what do you identify with most? Is it the mom? Is it the wife? Is it, daughter of a king? Is it the leader of a newsroom author? What is it? And we're all of those things, right? And I think that's kind of like my passion now, what I want people to know. It's like we're all whole and all of those experiences like are the whole.
Very true. Very true. I wouldn't agree with that more. So, as a three-time cancer survivor myself, I have to ask you, how you doing? I mean, what was your cancer experience like, and how are you doing right now?
I'm good right now. I have a lot of doctors. I have a lot of vigilant doctors. I am now, I think, 6 years out of the breast cancer, which was my most recent, a Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then I've had some skin cancers and then breast cancer. And it's interesting whenever you start getting a lot of doctors and they dig into things like how the certain ones are related to the other. But I'm in a time of vigilance. And I think when you've gone through experiences like that, you're never the same. But what I say, and especially kind of as I, go into this author time in my life and other things in my life, they've definitely made me more aware. I say this not as a downer. So it's if you take this on the surface, it sounds as a downer. It's not a downer, and to preface this. I am very aware of my mortality. And I think that's a lot of why you hear me talk about what I talk about. It makes you very aware. And we were talking earlier, I'm very aware that 2 generations ago I would have died 3 times already, but
Yeah.
I haven't. And there's a reason why I haven't. So what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to enjoy in life? Overall, health is good. Yes, I've gone through chemo multiple times, radiation multiple times, ongoing meds, and that does change. I don't have a normal body of a normal 50-year-old woman. I'm probably more like a normal 60-year-old woman, but I'm here and I'm here for a reason. And that's good. That's good.
I so know the feeling. Exactly, what you're expressing. And, I just recently started a new fundraising campaign for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which I'd done before when other people had leukemia or lymphoma. But now I've had it. So, I'm even more motivated since I survived it to, do that fundraising work for them.
Yeah. It's a great organization. And for those of y'all who don't know, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, so much of their research helps other cancers as well because
Oh,
it's intertwined
absolutely.
with the blood cancers and everything. So a lot of advancements from other cancers have come from the LLS. So great organization.
Well, all of the main medicines that I received during my chemo treatment were all sponsored in one way or another by LLS.
Mhm.
It was just like, oh my gosh, that kind of blew me away when I heard that. But anyway, very grateful. And I just want to help more people survive now. So before we get into your book, I'm sure a lot of people are curious about what it's like to run a newsroom. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what that's like?
Well, no day is hardly the same. It's it's it depends on the day, depends on the day. These are interesting times. These are interesting times, not just because of all the news playing out, but when you're the news director, I'm also in charge of the business side of the newsroom. And I would say the industry, like many industries, is in flux and transition. So I will say in the past, I've been a news director for 12 years now, and I luckily worked for a family-owned company
Hmm.
for the first part of my news director journey, and then we were sold, and we've been owned by a private equity group that's actually been very good to us in the past few years. But all media is in transition, just like books, and just like where people get books, where do people get their news? So it is a time where it is very stressful. I would say very spicy news-wise. Government-wise, it's been very interesting covering things legally, First Amendment under attack by some, truth being partisan. It's a weird, weird time, even though I would argue there have been similar times in history and even more recent history that people don't even, it's not all uncharted territory. It's very loud because of the state of media and where you get it, which is also impacting the business side, which goes
Sure.
into it. So business wise, we've got to do more and more and faster. And honestly, with less people
Mhm.
because of the way the industry has changed, just like so many industries.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's get in your book. As I mentioned, the title is Wired to Lead, being the leader the church didn't think you could be. So what led you to write a book, which is obviously a lot of work?
Well, I always wanted to write this book as I got into adulthood. And I would say, especially in my cancer journeys, I always felt this kind of ministry pull,
Hmm.
how to share this message. And what really got me, and I talk about this in the book, is I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up in the independent Christian churches and Churches of Christ, which is more of a conservative arm of the Campbellstone movement. So I never had the option. It was never really a clear option to be a full leader like my dad was in the church. And growing up, it didn't occur to me. That's just the way it was. I went to a Christian college. I ended up going into TV news. I ended up climbing the ranks. I ended up leading major newsrooms. And then as I'm getting more involved in church again as an adult, I'm seeing like a guy would walk into the church and he would automatically like get these leadership things. I'm like, I do more than that every day. Why am I not being asked to do these things? And then as I really learned my gifts from people in newsrooms embracing me, I was like, why weren't those gifts embraced in the church? So I thought there was a real message about
Yeah.
how we needed to catch women like me before it was too late. Because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, resentment was starting to set in because the place I wasn't accepted fully as me was the church. I was
Hmm.
accepted fully as me in my career, but I wasn't accepted and my gifts not accepted in the church coming up. And at the end of the day, I don't want that resentment to set in with any other young girls or young women. And that's what it's about.
Isn't it interesting how some industries will evolve more quickly than others?
Very much so. And I think, you know, thought-wise, news industry and journalism, because of what we do, has always been ahead.
Hmm.
And that is just at the core of journalism. It's interesting that Chalice Press is actually the publisher of the book. Chalice Press was a sponsor of Investigative Reporter Editors Conference.
Hmm.
Truth and journalism, I talk about this, go hand in hand. if you dig into the history of journalism, you see how they are actually intertwined. So it's interesting how in some circles, the journalists are looked at as evil people because at
Yeah.
the core of journalism, it's about justice. It's about love. It's about speaking up for the oppressed. It's about speaking up for the truth, which is why the disciples of Christ were very involved in the beginning. The Open Records Act, like
Hmm.
that, a church was involved in the Open Records Act. That's
I didn't
about
realize that.
accountability. That's that's about truth.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's interesting how you do look at that. And I would say because if you look at the roots of journalism, because it is speaking up for justice and speaking up for the oppressed, it is an area where having other people at the table has always been encouraged. Have we gotten it right? No. And I would say many of my fellow journalists of color would tell you there's still been a lot of room, and it's not that way in every newsroom. And if you would look at the leadership of TV stations, while mid-level, it's been very people of color, it's been a lot of women, but then when you get to the very top, there's been, you see a lot of white guys. But at the end of the day, the conversations, having the different voices at the table, and a lot of that has been embraced by amazing organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists and National Association of Hispanic Journalists. I came from a company though where we were led by, they call them, some people call them the female media mafia. Uh, the president of Cox Media Group for a long time that I was there was a woman. The executive vice presidents there were more women at the top, and those are the women who really embraced me and brought me up.
Yay. Good for you. Good for them. So who would you say the book's most intended for?
We had a lot of talk about this while I was writing this book. I would say most intended for people like me. And that was a challenge when you're talking about writing the book, because I remember the agent I got connected with, she's like, the problem you're going to have is women like you don't read a lot of Christian books. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But it's also for, and I say this in the book, I'm not going to change anyone's stance in that book. There's not a big like convincing part in the book about why you need to change your views, even though I dropped a few little hints in there. I do want people just to think about in the church as well, no matter where you stand, what it is that you may be unintentionally doing that is quashing the spirits of women who are wired to lead or girls who are wired to lead. So I'd say two parts, people in the church and then women like myself. And at the end of each chapter, there are action items and thoughts and thought prompts for both of those areas. Because I thought Brad, the publisher of my book, wrote a great thing on Chalice's website where he said, the disciples of Christ have embraced women in the pulpit for a long time, but there's still only 25% of the pulpits are filled by women.
Hmm.
So I would just challenge before someone says, that's not for me. What are you unintentionally doing? Maybe you are still unintentionally quashing the spirits and that of people that you don't realize. And that's who it's for too. And those who
Well,
intentionally do it as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say not only women like you, but younger women like you, because your book is full of these life lessons, right? That you learned over the course of several years. And so for younger folks that don't have that degree of experience or that breadth of experience, I think it's particularly useful.
Yeah, and I was talking to my boss, Marion, who is mentioned in the book quite a few times. I'm always like, you're a hero in the book. And she's like, not everything you write in the book is good. I was like, but they were life lessons I learned in a newsroom. And it would be beautiful if I learned those in a church. But so many of those things we talked about more in a newsroom than we ever did at church. I was an adult before I heard a sermon about racial injustice. An
Hmm.
adult who grew up in the church and went to a Christian college, but yet we talk about that in a newsroom every day, bringing up women and not cutting them down. How to speak the truth in love. Like in some ways, I learned that more in a newsroom than I did at church. Bible-based principles And yeah, those are the life lessons, the leadership lessons that align with faith. So I would say yes, any young woman who is wired to lead, who wants faith-based lessons, great for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So your book is divided into four sections, and particularly I like the fourth title, Be the Solution. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to organize the book?
I had an amazing woman who helped me. Her name's Carolyn Reedmaster. You know, part of the journey, as I told you, the folks who are listening to this, you were part of my journey. I found the website whenever I started writing to learn connections. And I think you connected me. The publisher I ended up going with was on a
Yeah.
list of some other people who who gave me guidance. I randomly couldn't sleep one night and had emailed Katie Cole, who was the author of Developing Female Leaders, who was
Mm,
written for churches on developing female leaders in the church space. And she got back to me within 24 hours and I told her my story. And she said, I'd love to connect you with the person who helped me write my book. And
mm,
Carolyn
mm,
Greenmaster is her name. And we went through this great journey. She basically helped me get it over the hurdle. Like, I had all these ideas and I would just write. Her first thing to me was, I just want you to write it. Just write. And you'll enjoy this and some of your listeners will enjoy this. She came back to me and she said, it's very clear that you've been writing an entire career for spoken and not
mm,
reading
mm.
and journalistically. She's like, you're very concise, you're to the point. She's like, you can't read a mic drop. Like you can speak a mic drop. And there were parts where, so she just told me, and it's interesting. I'm talking to you all from a 120-year-old farmhouse in Carthage, Missouri, near where my parents live. And it was this spring break 4 years ago that Carolyn and we sat down and wrote an outline. And this is what I want you to do on this spring break. If this spring break is dedicated to writing, just write. Just write through it. And so it was in this little farmhouse that I just wrote. And then we would go back and forth and she would be like, okay, expand on this.
Mm,
Okay,
mm,
you can have an opinion here. Tell a story here. And she said, Suzanne, within a few months, just because I was naturally knew how to like boil it all down, she just helped me expand on it.
mm, mm.
As far as the order, it went back and forth quite a bit too, because after then all that expanding, I had to cut down a little bit. So we just kept on re-massaging it and reworking it. And it was good for me. And I'm glad I was in a space. I was able to have someone work with me on that. And I would say authors who can't afford that, there are authors who are willing to like exchange that and do it for each other and just like,
Yeah.
and read and just give feedback. I feel very blessed. I was able to have someone work with me on it. It's what she does for a living. Uh, but it was a lot of massaging. And some of it, we ended up cutting out some chapters and just like that's for a future book or a blog. Like it doesn't fit like where we thought it would fit. And that's where I'd also say to people too, in going through those different areas is don't be afraid. We talk about this even in news stories. It's you have to like sometimes cut the things you love the most because it just doesn't fit and it can maybe go someplace else. So it was
Sure.
a journey and it was constant massaging and it was being willing to accept the feedback. I will say this. She said it was a joy working with me because I didn't get upset when she made suggestions. And some of the other editors with the publisher said that. And I do think that's because I had a newsroom background where
Ah,
we copy edit people's stuff every day. So I know that's not personal, but they say a lot of authors take it very personally.
mm.
And it was interesting that I didn't take it personally. And I do think that's because I'm used to that process every day.
I can totally see how that would be the case. Good for you. So one of the statements you write in the book is, others have told me I have reached more people by leading a newsroom than I would have reached from a pulpit. Perhaps they're right. I can totally understand that, but can you talk a little bit about that distinction?
Yeah, that came from a story. that I share when I was talking about that resentment and frustration with a fellow Christian who is in news. And she told me that at dinner.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, right? Think I have. And a lot of people have brought up that quote. They're like, you have. And that's part of, I guess, the journey that God had me on, that this resentment that I would have that I couldn't take a pulpit in my eyes based on my upbringing and things people told me led to me having this place of speaking. What I say to folks about that though is remember you've got a voice wherever you are.
Hmm.
And while we shouldn't limit and quash people, wherever you are, you have a voice. The college I went to is Milligan College in Northeast Tennessee. And one of their mottos is Christian education, the hope of the world. And the thought behind that was we're only going to reach people if we have Christians in all professions everywhere, not just training preachers and teachers. We've got to train everyone. I think that's true. And my message would be whatever your path was, don't forget that you have a voice and you're in a place of influence and
Hmm.
embrace what that path was. Even if you think the path could have been a little better, embrace the path because there's a reason why you took it.
Hmm. Very good. Very good. So, your book is filled with lessons learned, and one of the things I love is that you're not just telling stories, but you're drawing conclusions and stating those conclusions. That seemed to be important to you.
Yeah. If you don't take something and move it forward, what's the purpose of it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like in the Be the Solution section when I had some aha moments in 2020 about racial injustice and realized how I had been part of the problem. And a black woman who was a leader in the newsroom said, "Okay, now you know what are you going to do about it?" We can have all this knowledge. We can say all of these things on social media. We can write all the books. People can tell you and give you constructive criticism on how you can be better all the time. You can learn a lesson. But if you just keep repeating the same mistake over and over, what's the point? What's the point? So, yeah, draw the conclusion. What's your action item? How do you move it forward? Because knowing is just half the battle. It's like emotional intelligence. Like my first part of my emotional intelligence journey was like, oh, well, that wasn't a good emotionally intelligent response. Well, what am I going to do to change that in the future? What are you going to do to move the ball forward?
Well, it's been surprising to me. I read a lot of books, right? Because, I do interviews with authors launching new books. And you'd be surprised how many books maybe are great in analysis, but not so much on, okay, what do we do about it? So, I was glad that you didn't fall into that category. That's what meant by, that you were stating conclusions, not just, telling a story.
Well, and I want this to be something that sparks conversation and action. And so to kind of make them full circle moment. And my hope would be that like, some discussion groups and some congregations and
Mhm.
stuff come out of it as well to do that. I mean, we can say we suck and we're doing awful at something over and over and over, but if you're just wallowing in that, go
Mhm.
forward. So yeah, that's my hope. To your point, is that people can really use it for little groups. I already had a spoke at a reading club, last week, and the women came out and they're like, okay, what do we do? Like, we're talking about these things. What do we do? And, a bunch of them ended up going to a march Saturday for like, that's something that we felt we could do. Like, we talked about what can we do? Well, as women who want to make a difference, show up at the polls. Like, that's something you can do for your local elections. People are so talking about peer, but you know what? It starts your local
Yeah.
is want to talk about books. You want to talk about what's happening to books in schools. That's your school board election. And if you're upset about that and you're not showing up to vote for your school board, you're not doing something that you could do. So
Mhm.
it's the action with a conclusion. I agree.
So the title of one of your chapters is Speak the Truth in Love. So speaking of the truth in journalism, couldn't be more important, I don't think, than it is today, but difficult as well. Can you tell us about the pressures a newsroom faces in that regard?
It is because sometimes if you speak the truth, it's viewed as being partisan and even like historical facts. And you've got 50% of the country who views things one way and 50%, it's a divided country. And we have
Mhm.
that conversation all the time because we have to realize it is a very divided country and people view things differently. And balance is very difficult when you're talking about truth and everything as well. So sometimes, and I would say this is in all things in life and everything too, it, it, it's it's determining how to tell the truth, how to tell the side, sometimes even who's saying it and how. Like, okay, so if this fact is going to be viewed as polarizing, maybe it's we make sure an expert or somebody who is a professor or someone like that, making sure we're laying it out. I have a great political reporter. He is so into balance, to the second in balance and making sure we're there. But I'm talking in roundabout ways because it is a struggle and deep conversation on every single story. I mean, I'm in Georgia. I was leading the newsroom that was talked about between Secretary Brad Raffensperger and President Trump about we were the station that did the video that showed that there was no exchange of
Mm,
ballots in
mm,
Fulton County. And
mm,
it's been crazy town for 5 years navigating all levels of it. And and it's our job to do our due diligence and do there. But again, I'm talking in circles because there's no cut and dry answer.
Oh no,
It's deep
absolutely.
information every story. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard.
No,
It's hard.
I totally can see that.
Yeah,
It's a tough. You're in a tough position. I mean, as and there's a lot of gray, right?
there's a lot of
Not
gray, and
quite.
you know what? Some of it, and what we talk about is letting each side also say what they have to say, and then going back and forth and laying it out. Truth is often in numbers. It's taking a look at the data to see what's happened, giving that context, perspective, and relevance. We talk about that a lot. What is the
Mm.
context? What is the perspective? What is the relevance of what's going on? What is the historical data? Where is it you can see? And again, it's just telling their stories as well. And that's just at the heart of journalism. And you cut through so much of letting people just tell their stories. At the end of the day, as journalists, if we do a good job of showing what's really going on, a lot will uncover itself. And it's telling those stories of what's really going on. And that touches hearts.
Mm. So, what would you most like people to take away from your book?
That God made you the way you are for a reason. And we need to remember that God made people the way they are for a reason. And if somebody was wired to lead and God wired them to lead, we should embrace them on how they're wired to lead, no matter what their gender is, no matter who they are. God made them that way for a reason. And who are we to decide what they can and can't do? How can we support them? And that we need to do better, church, because when we don't do that and other things, especially now more than ever, people will find someone else to embrace them.
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
sad. That's sad that you can feel more embraced in how you are outside the church than within the church.
Yeah,
And that's where we can do better.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So, as you know, we have quite a few new authors, aspiring authors in our audience. What would you offer them for advice for someone writing the first book?
Reach out to all the resources that are out there. And Brian, again, you were amazing. Again, I think I find it no coincidence that I'm talking to you 4 years ago And then 3 years ago on that, after I wrote it, I think that's when I got plugged in because I got plugged into
Yeah.
you after I wrote it.
Yeah.
So it was then the whole marketing thing and how do you figure all that out? And I'd signed up for one of your courses and I actually listened to it in the kitchen connected to this room right now that I'm in. So yeah, listen. This is one thing I find with new authors where they don't get off on. It's hard to be an author and it's hard to get out there. And this is like coming from somebody who runs a high profile newsroom and I've got a pretty good Instagram following and all of these things and it's still difficult. And then it's interesting in author space how everybody wants to argue about how, well, I don't want to do that. There's some things you got to embrace and figure out and do because it's just the world we're living. And if you want to be published, you got to embrace that. So be open to what they're talking to you about. When it comes to marketing and brand building, it's the world we're living in, and it doesn't have to look the same for everyone, but you got to figure out what that's going to look like for you. And I would say don't be afraid to reach out because what I have found in entrepreneurial world, I'm kind of going to be phasing out of the newsroom soon and doing some other exciting things.
Oh, good.
So yeah. So people in entrepreneurial and author world are so nice and so willing to help. So ask your question and ask for help, and there will be people.
Amen. Amen. It's really a wonderful community in that regard. But my next question was going to be, so what are you going to do next? And you just kind of led into
Yes,
that for me. Can you
I
talk
just
anything
led right
about that or
into it.
not?
So I'm gonna try to write 3 chapters of my next book next this week.
Good.
I'm actually going to be transitioning out of the newsroom daily. I'm still going to do some consulting work. It's been 30 years this year, and with the health challenges, I realized that the entrepreneurial, the leadership space, and everything that the book, even just trying to get the book out, has led me to has been really awesome. I'm currently now CEO of a new group called She Leads Church. It's actually not a new group. We acquired it and we're gifted it. And we had a virtual conference in March. And God put together many women, but 5 of us who are co-owners on different levels and on the board. We didn't even know each other a year ago, and we live in different parts across the country. And we feel called to take what was started in 2019, 2020 by someone else and to take that and run with it and provide a space for women who are either in church leadership or in leadership in corporate world who are women of faith and to empower them, whether it be connecting them with coaches, connecting them with people who can help them write a book, with conferences, cohorts, retreats. So that is really exciting. Building something from the ground up with some folks is really exciting. But what we found is we have our first meetup this week. We had a virtual conference last month, and then we're starting a monthly meetup. We were kind of late out of the gate and we're like, do we want to stall on a month or do we want to keep the momentum going? We're like, well, we'll just keep the momentum going. If it's 20 people, it's 20 people. And when we posted, we're doing a monthly meetup on Thursday on grace over grind, fighting perfectionism, which I think I write about this in the book. I think it's a real problem, especially among women in the church. Like we feel like we don't go where we're called because we feel like we have to do everything and we feel like we have to do it perfectly. Within 24 hours, 80 people signed up, and now we're way over
Awesome.
that. Like there,
Awesome.
there is a need for a place for women of faith who are leaders, and we're seeing where that takes us, and that's really
Excellent.
exciting. So I'm going to be
That
doing that
is.
and speaking more and writing the book and then doing some news consulting because I can't get that totally out of my system yet.
Well, good for you. I mean, that is so outstanding to hear, Suzanne. I mean, isn't it interesting how impact on someone's health has a tendency, is serious, is what, like you and I have gone through, has a tendency to, I think, foster innovation. Because you kind of as you mentioned earlier, you kind of realize your mortality. You realize you only have, X amount of time on this planet, and as Frederick Buechner would say, use it as bravely and courageously as you can, right? And so, the fact that you're going out on your own in some sense now and doing something that sounds like it has huge amount of impact potential is just wonderful.
Well, when it came time to write the book, and it was like a year or two after the breast cancer, and in my contract, because I run a newsroom, there are all these non-competes, and they own all the work I do and all of that. And so when I partnered with Carolyn, and I was saying, oh, and then I've got this whole non-compete ownership, all of this kind of stuff in it. I don't know if I should get a intellectual property attorney to get something saying it wouldn't. And she said, just ask them, Suzanne. Just ask them. So I went and I just asked my bosses, and I phrased it like this. And then when my next contract came up and there was talk about how much time I was spending, I said, here it is. If I'm told that I have cancer again, I am fully aware what it is I would regret not doing in life. And I would regret not pushing to get this book done. And you're right. It does make you think about what would I regret not doing? And sometimes you just got to go for it. Yeah, it does bring it home.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, again, this is the book, Wired to Lead. Um, Being the leader the church didn't think you could be. So check out SuzanneNadell.com and ChaliceBreast.com. And what's the domain name of your new effort that you just told us about? She leads,
SheLeadsChurch.com.
SheLeadsChurch.com. Great. Awesome. Well, Suzanne, many congratulations on all of your wonderful work and best wishes going forward. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.